Hello, my name's Amoghavira, and here I am sitting in some lovely woodland in the Pass of Lenny, about a couple of miles from my house. So I've come here to tell you about the Awake in the Wild retreat, which I would have been running this week at Dharma, but unfortunately, due to the coronavirus pandemic, we've not been able to run the retreat this year. Awake in the Wild is a going deeper retreat. So, a going deeper retreat is a step up from a beginner's or an introductory retreat. So, we assume that people already have a prior experience of meditation, they've probably done a retreat before. So, we'll be doing more meditation than we normally do on an introductory retreat. There'll be more emphasis on silence, and there'll be more Buddhist ritual which we'll be practicing as well. So the theme of Awake in the Wild is nature awareness. Now, nature awareness practice is something that we've been developing at Dharma for quite a few years on the hill walking retreats that we run. Those of us who run these retreats are, we love being in wild places. We love hill walking, we love being outside, and we love practicing in the great outdoors. So it seemed a natural thing for us to think about developing a retreat where the primary focus was on nature awareness and how nature awareness can help us deepen our practice of meditation and of Buddhism. So we have a great emphasis on this retreat on being outside. We're outside as much as we can be, really. We run the retreat in May, which is a good month to be outside. Often the weather seems to be really good in May. In fact, the last couple of times we've run the retreat, the weather's been absolutely stunning, absolutely fantastic. And also in May, it's before the midges start. So for those of you who don't know what a midge is, it's a little biting insect which you find in Scotland, particularly the Highlands of Scotland. And they're usually active from around the beginning of June onwards. So if I was sitting out here in a month's time, I'd last about 5 minutes. Yeah, and then the midges would find me, and that would be the end of meditation. But this time of year, no midges, so you can sit uninterrupted. So to get into the way of being outside, we build a meditation space outside. So we have an outside shrine, and this is in the woods behind Dharma. So there's a little grove, fairly flat, with mainly oak trees, and at this time of year it's carpeted with bluebells. And it's got the river, the stream, which runs down by the side. So it's a stunning location for meditation. So we do a lot of the meditation out in this shrine, and I must say I really love meditating outside. It to me is a different quality of experience from indoor meditation. It's as if outside, well, it's true in that there's no walls, there's no barriers between us and the spaciousness of the landscape, the spaciousness of the sky above. And for me, it just naturally leads me into a more spacious state of meditation, a more spacious state of being, which is a great foundation for meditation practice. So on the retreat, we do the traditional meditations we do at Dharma. We do the mindfulness of breathing, we do the metta bhavana, we do the just sitting practice, and also we'll introduce some outdoor themed meditations. So for example, we'll do a meditation focusing on the earth element in terms of visualizing ourselves as mountains, rooted, grounded into the earth. and we'll temporarily relocate down to the loch shore, down to Loch Voil, and we'll do a meditation by the loch there, focusing on the water element and the qualities of the water element. And we'll do a sky meditation. So for this meditation, generally we lie on our backs, and usually we choose a day where there's a lot of blue sky, and we'll do a bit of sky gazing and tuning in to the element of space, and through that moving towards getting a glimpse of the spaciousness of our own minds. So outside of sitting meditation, we do nature awareness practices every day, and one of the main ones we do every day is Qigong practice. So we're very lucky to have Diana Barnard, who teaches on our Qigong retreats in the spring, and she does Qigong every day with a particular emphasis on the elements in the landscape, on connecting the Qigong movements with elements of the natural world around us. And this is just fantastic work to do. We'll also teach exercises which encourage sense awareness of the landscape, connecting with the surrounding landscape with all our senses, the visual sense, the hearing sense, the touching sense, and the smelling sense as well. We have to be careful with the tasting sense, so we can do a wee bit of this in a guided fashion, but please don't do this on your own if you don't know what you're doing. There's lots of poisonous things in the natural world, including bluebells, for example, of which there are many this time of year. So the idea of a full sense experience, this whole mind-body interaction with nature, is we become more intimate with the landscape around us. We become more immersed in nature rather than being disconnected, a disconnected observer just briefly looking at things, but there's so much stuff going on in our heads that we barely give it a glance and then we move on. So that's very superficial, and we're looking for something much deeper, more enriching and nourishing. So I wanted to say something about my own connection with nature and why it's so important to me. So I'm going to talk about how that developed for me. So I grew up about 20 miles from here in some hills in the lowlands of Scotland, in between Glasgow and Stirling, but it was a rural upbringing, and it was a very beautiful place to be brought up. But there was a dark side of life for me from quite early on, because I was bullied at school, and bullied over a number of years. Now this was at times a very difficult time for me, very distressing. I felt quite alone with it for some reason. I don't really know why. I just didn't feel I could talk to anyone about it really. So I just kind of suffered it, put up with it. But what it seemed to do was push me outside. So when I got home from school, particularly after a rough day, I would just head out into nature and spend time in nature. One thing that helped me with this was becoming a bird watcher. I joined the Young Ornithologist Club and started becoming aware of all the different birds that were around the village I stayed in. I eventually got to about 100 different species in those years of bird watching, and I just loved it. I love birds, I love wildlife, and I love nature. And one of the things I learned about watching nature watching wildlife, is it's no good just going charging through the woods and hope to see something. You have to be quiet and you have to be still. So what I did was I'd find a place to be and just be still for maybe an hour, 2 hours. And what I found was that it's as if nature accepted my presence after a time, and I became part of the landscape, and the buds would just come to me. And I always loved this when the wildlife started appearing. I just kind of felt, accepted by nature, by the world around me. It didn't matter how distressed I started off. Quite often I would experience, after 2 or 3 hours outside, I would experience great contentment at times, peace, and it just felt like my suffering, as it were, just melted away, and somehow the experience of being in nature transcended the dukkha, the suffering that I was experiencing. I mean, this didn't always happen, obviously, but it did happen quite a lot, and certainly it was a great sustaining force in my life when I was growing up in my teenage years. There was another factor which played in, and that was, school was obviously difficult, but there were some things I did enjoy about school, and one of them was the English class. So we had a good English teacher who did take an interest in me, and one of the things he did was he read out to the class in a double period every week, and he read several books, most of which I can't remember, but the one I really do remember vividly, in fact some of the phrases are still in my mind, is My Family and Other Animals by Gerald Durrell. And this was a great book for me to hear at this time. It was about a young Gerald Durrell growing up in Corfu and becoming a wildlife enthusiast. His family would have said he was totally obsessed with wildlife. But it was a fantastic story to hear, and I started writing about nature. I started producing essays on my trips, on my birdwatching trips, and my feelings I had when I was birdwatching. And the English teacher really encouraged me in this. He always marked these essays quite high. The rest of my English was pretty poor, actually. On the whole, I wasn't that great at English, but my nature essays stood out, as it were, from the rest of what I did in English. But this had a big effect on me, the fact of him taking an interest and introducing me to Gerald Durrell, and after this I bought what Gerald Durrell books I could. So this is something of my own story, and it led really to a lifelong love of nature. And when I left school, nature stayed with me. I became a hill walker, and after hill walking, backpacking came next, and instead of just going up individual hills, I started to, when I could, going off for longer trips, longer walks over several days in the hills. And I still love doing this to this day, this sense of each day becoming more and more immersed in nature. So now I find nature is part of my practice as a Buddhist. It's important for me to spend time outside being in nature. And this is nothing new in Buddhism. If you go back to the time of the Buddha, you find that nature occurs a lot in the early Buddhist scriptures. The Buddha meditated outside. He gained enlightenment outside. His disciples meditated outside. And you find quite a rich sense of the natural world and the spirits that inhabit the natural world. Tree spirits talk to the Buddha. So you get this sense of a very alive landscape at the time of the Buddha, and they were very alive, in tune with the landscape. They certainly weren't disconnected from the landscape, and you get this vivid sense of the landscape supporting their practice of Buddhism, their practice of meditation. So if you like the sound of this and want to come up to Danakosha next year and explore being awake in the wild with us, then we'll be running the retreat this time next year.